Hello again, friends. I am Steve Taylor, one of the illustrious crew at fthatnoisepod.com. I am continuing my series, Steve Attempts to Read, my first novel, The Lockbox. This is actually going to be the 14th and final chapter and the epilogue, and then this book will be done. And then next week, I'm going to be starting on the sequel, Homecoming. Now, as always, these videos will be streaming on both fthatnoisepod.com and also my personal website, staylorbooks.com. There are links to YouTube. If you get to YouTube, definitely subscribe to my page. You'll be able to have access to all the former videos and then any new content that I put up. I am working towards the third book, Mama, right now, but I'm also working on a children's book. I'm going to see which one ends first. And then I'm just going to continue this series and just hopefully this is entertaining. I do have to apologize if you hear like a humming in the background. It is 1,000,000 degrees in Rochester, New York right now, and I have to have the air conditioning going or I would be a sweaty, dying mess right now. So I do apologize. I re-listen to these videos. You can hear my voice fine. There's just that little hum in the background, so I hope that doesn't really bother you. But as always, these videos and all of the content will be brought to you by Trashman Media. Trashman Media for the latest home video reviews of films you may not see at your local Redbox. Visit them at trashmanmedia.com. Also brought to you by Bizarre Abyss, the site dedicated to news and straight talk. Visit them at bizarreabyss.com. And of course, don't forget to check out the #1 podcast among all the coolest people in the world, F That Noise. Check us out every Monday night at fthatnoisepod.com. And parents, the podcast is not for young people. It is very adult, but also very funny. It's just 5 guys talking about anything in a very funny way. So please check us out. And as always, if you like what you hear in both the Lockbox and Homecoming, go to staylorbooks.com. There are links to both the paperback and digital versions of both books on my website, and they are through Amazon. Okay? So without further ado, can't believe it's the final day of this. We are going to finish up The Lockbox. Chapter 14. The turbulence snapped Emily out of her dream. Her hand clenched as if still holding the pistol that ended the life of another. Her memory of shooting the man in black replayed over in her head. His chest exploding into a sea of red had become the screensaver of her subconscious. She wiped the sleep from her eyes as she tried to adjust to her new surroundings. Soft music and air conditioning had replaced the smoke and gunfire of the battle. She was sprawled out over 2 seats of a plane of some kind. Her clothes had been changed and an IV pumped some kind of clear fluid into her veins. She sat up and looked around the cabin. It wasn't a large plane. In fact, she recognized the interior from the last flight she had taken. This was the same Cessna that brought Sam and her to Chicago. The sky outside was dark, the only light coming from a brilliant moon looking in the window at her. She sat up and disconnected the IV from her arm. As she stood, the world once again spun, forcing her back down into her seat. "Careful," a voice echoed from the cockpit. "You've been out for 2 days. She looked up at the familiar voice. "Where are we?" Joe entered the cabin and sat down next to her. His face was covered in bruises and there was a line of stitches across his left cheek. As he approached her seat, she noticed he had acquired a slight limp that looked to cause him pain with each step. "We're 20,000 feet in the air on our way to Scotland." "Scotland? Why are we going there? What's happened?" Her head beginning to clear, she finally realized that something was missing and sprang to her feet. "Where's Sam?" The sudden movement caused her once again to pitch forward and clutch the seat. "Careful now, Emily. Just sit down. I think you might have a concussion and you need to relax. It's actually a miracle you're alive." She sat back into her seat and looked into Joe's eyes. "Where's my brother? How much do you remember about that day?" Emily closed her eyes and once again stared into the face of the man in black as he was flung back from the force of her attack. "I remember helping Ethan carry Sam towards the garage. We were so close when I was suddenly shoved back. A second later, I was flying through the air, then nothing." As the sad realization of the other missing comrade hit her, Emily grabbed Joe's wrist. "Ethan." "Joe, what happened to Ethan?" Joe's solemn expression answered her question before he even spoke a word. Ethan didn't make it. I didn't see it happen, but after what you just told me, I can assume he sacrificed himself to save you and Sam. I'm truly sorry. He was a great man. Emily turned her attention back to the night sky outside of her window. She didn't shed a tear over the news, even though she knew she should. Her sadness and pain had reached a level that made her numb. Trying to get her focus back on the situation at hand, Joe shook her leg. Hey, kiddo, I need you to refocus on what happened after the explosion. Emily turned her expressionless face towards Joe. When I awoke, you were hunched over me and I thought you might be dead. It was then that I saw the man in black. He had a gun in his hand and he was shooting Mr. Kerr over and over. He had caused us so much pain that I knew something had to be done to finally stop him. So I grabbed your gun and shot him. This last statement caused her to rub her head. I see him in my sleep. His body is just a mess of blood. I can't stop thinking about it. Joe put his hand on her knee. You did what you had to do. I hope you know that we are both here because of your bravery. Thank you for that. Who was he? After doing some checking, I was able to match him with an operative working for Echo. He had many aliases, but the name that continued to pop up was Saber. I believe he was the man behind the attack on your town. Emily closed her eyes, preparing for what was to come next. Where is my brother? Joe picked up a water bottle and took a long swig before continuing. I awoke just as the sound of the police sirens could be heard in the distance. Saber was dead and Gerald was gone along with your brother. I was hoping you might have seen something. Emily opened her eyes. How? I saw Mr. Kerr shot 1,000,000 times. He was dead. How could he have gotten up and walked away after being shot 1,000 times? Joe smiled. I can't answer that. What I do know is that he is one stubborn old fool and a big bag of tricks. With a big bag of tricks. He's not dying till he's good and ready. Emily pitched forward and slapped the armrest, her newfound ferocity erupting into a suppressed rage. How could we just leave without knowing what happened to them? Joe raised his hands in hopes of calming her. Calm down. Gerald must have grabbed Sam before he left. I can only assume that he thought we were dead, and in the confusion of the situation just helped the one person he thought he could. I'm sorry, Emily, but we need to get out of here, and I'm sure Sam would have wanted you to be safe. What about the lockbox? Please tell me the reason this entire mess didn't fall into Echo's hands. The box was in Sam's backpack, so I can only guess that it's with him and Gerald wherever they are. Hell, could have been destroyed in the attack. I'm afraid once again that I just don't know. The news was like a dull knife in her side. She sat back, shifting her gaze out her window. What now? She mumbled as her focus once again centered around the brilliant light that filled the night sky. We need to disappear. I have a small place in Glasgow that we can hole up in. He reached for her hand in a weak gesture of condolence. To his shock, her hand was warm but also lifeless. The events of the past week caused more damage to her soul than her physical self. She remained motionless as her hollow gaze remained focused out the small window. Joe let go of her hand and moved back into the cockpit. He had seen many things during his years in the CIA, but he still wasn't ready for the pain he felt for this young woman. 2 weeks ago, Emily Lana had just been another American teenager trying to make her way in the world. She had a family that loved her and a bright future. Today, she is an empty shell with only her nightmares to comfort her. Her world had crumbled around her, but there was another one on the other side of the darkness. The end. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I am going to continue with the epilogue, but that was the end of the main story, and I love that book. I know I'm sound like a proud papa, but it was the first one I ever wrote, and I just love it. And I love the story, so I hope everyone is enjoying. And finally, the epilogue. June 6th, 2015, Palermo, Sicily. A warm summer breeze roused the small group of seagulls that perched just below the second-floor balcony of the run-down 18th century villa. This dilapidated home was situated in a prime location just off the coast of the Mediterranean, and it was the home to many creatures big and small. As the birds flew off into the night sky, the petite form of a young woman in a flowing summer dress emerged from the structure to watch their flight. Her posture was that of a confident woman twice her age, each curve rippled with the lean muscle of an athlete. The long black hair that once flowed over her shoulders like the gentle trickle of a brook in the twilight was now replaced by a blonde pixie cut, slightly curled in the front. The now exposed skin of her neck caused her to shiver with every gentle breeze. She had called this place home for the past 3 months, but she never tired of the view. As she took in the scenery, a man walked up from behind and put his hand on her shoulder. As she reached over and patted his hand, she shook her head in disgust. You know I heard you before you even climbed the stairs. You're getting sloppy in your old age. The man pulled his hand away as he sat down on one of the chairs that adorned the balcony. Now listen here, young lady. I might not be as flexible as I used to be, but I can still whoop your butt in a fight. Emily just smirked as she at his posturing. Dream on, Joe. I'm 80 years younger than you, and besides, you taught me too well. She kicked his chair before taking the seat across from her aging mentor. Shifting his attention away from the abusive teen, Joe looked out over the water as if it was in heaven. Beautiful, isn't it? I haven't been here in well over a decade, but I will always call this place home. I still can't believe your family owns this place. It could use a fresh coat of paint and an exterminator's touch, but all in all, it's not too shabby. The two friends spent the next few minutes in quiet reflection. It had been 2 years since the tragedy in Shoshone Peak, and they had been on the move ever since. Once Joe landed their plane in Scotland, he had spent a few months searching the many resources he still had for any sign that either Gerald or Sam was still alive. During this time, he had spent multiple hours each day instructing Emily in everything he knew about survival and combat. If she was to become his ward, then she better know how to handle herself in a fight. Gerald's trail never heated up. It looked as if the old friend still had a few tricks up his sleeve. Joe just hoped that once the dust had settled, Gerald would find them. There was an increasing chatter pertaining to Joe and his group. Echo seemed desperate to find the ones responsible for the death of one of its best agents, and they never gave up their pursuit of the lockbox. This constant danger forced Joe and Emily to move around as much as possible. 1 month they would be in the Netherlands, then the next 6 they would spend in Budapest. The one constant that always remained the same was Emily's training. At first, Joe had trained her as just a way to protect her, but now she had advanced enough to become a viable and willing partner in Joe's endgame to wipe every trace of Echo off the face of the earth. The time had to be closing in at 9:30 p.m. when the doorbell rang. Emily was about to get up when Joe motioned for her to stay. I'm not expecting any visitors. Get in position and wait for my signal. As Joe got up from his seat, he removed a Glock 19 from his ankle holster. Emily reached under her chair and removed the compact 9mm Beretta Storm Joe got her for her birthday this past year. It was one of her favorite possessions, and she had become very proficient with it. After checking her magazine, she leapt over the edge of the balcony, catching the drain pipe that ran down the side. She had used this method almost every night to sneak out of the local bars after Joe went to bed. Joe made his way to the front door while Emily shimmied down the drain pipe leading to the first floor. After reaching the ground, she silently made her way to the front, keeping herself hidden behind the tall bushes that decorated the front of the villa. As she peered around the corner, she could see the back of a man's head. He was tall, at least 6 foot or more. She couldn't see his face due to the Yankee cap that covered most of his blonde hair. His baggy Hawaiian shirt and cargo shorts hung loosely from his skinny frame. He couldn't have weighed more than $160 tops. His legs and arms were covered with multiple tattoos which seemed to hide some serious scars. But none of this mattered because whoever he was, he picked the wrong damn house. Emily was focused on the stranger as Joe opened the door. Joe smiled and acknowledged their guest. Can I help you? It took Emily a second to notice the look of shock on Joe's face as his words of greeting fell short. The stranger broke the silence first. I finally found you. Emily slowly lowered a weapon. It had been an eternity, but she knew that voice. It was the same voice used to torment her when she would take too long in the bathroom. The same voice that consoled her when her parents were murdered. Stepping from the shadow, she approached the man's back. Sam? How did you... Samuel Lana turned towards his baby sister, a silver box in his heavily scarred hands. I'm Superman. Remember? The end. I love it. Okay. Really hope you enjoyed it. Once again, go to staylorbooks.com. You can find the paperback and digital versions of the Lockbox. It is very well priced. I did not make it expensive, and I think it is well worth it. Remember, next week we are going to be getting Homecoming, which is what I ended up doing was, after speaking with some of the younger fans of the Lockbox, they mentioned that they liked shorter reads. So I decided to break the second book into 3 novellas. And so it's going to be the Echoes book trilogy. And book 1 is Homecoming. And that's what we are going to start next week. And then once again, I'm working hard on Mama. I am laser focused to get it out by the end of the year. And then the final book will hopefully be out next year. And then we'll wrap up this trilogy and hopefully continue the saga of Emily Lana into future books. Okay? But I thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend.